Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, May 17th, 2017. Got lots of big news to cover today. For instance, the refrigerator is broken. Now I'm really at war with Trump. This guy has broken my refrigerator. I think it should be under warranty, and I can't find all of my paperwork. I believe that he had his goon squad break in and take my receipt. I don't even know. Not sure where I bought it from. It was either Lowe's or Home Depot, and I hope it was the politically correct one of the two. I don't remember who we were mad at then, nor who we are boycotting now. Somebody please help remind me. Or if anybody is really good with LG refrigerators, it is time to get on the Kagro in the Morning horse and ride on over to Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters and fix this thing up. I don't know. It's kind of tough. And we're going to have to deal with this. I think there's probably some other things going on somewhere out there in the world, and we'll try and figure out what some of those things are. Luckily, we have lots of help today. I haven't even checked all of my emergency feeds to see whether there's anything wrong. Why not? Everything else will go wrong, too, right? I assume at this point that Joan McCarter's fridge is going to break, and Greg, let's see. I mean, he's got a generator. Although if the refrigerator just breaks, I mean, my electricity is on. You see, I'm discombobulated. I blame this all on Trump, and he likely fired all the people who can fix this thing. This was rather difficult to deal with, of course, in order to get the kids out the door. That was difficult. Everybody didn't have, all their food's out. So we have luckily we have a spare refrigerator. Like a lot of people, we have the old refrigerator is out in the garage and still plugged in, and we keep additional stuff in it. So all the sodas got moved out and all the milks got moved in. And so we'll see if we can't make this thing work. And luckily, our old president is also in my garage, and we can take him out and get him started and perhaps plug him back into the electrical grid if we can just get rid of this one bum refrigerator / president we have operating now. All right. So, like I said, I don't know what the hell's going on this morning. We'll check around. Greg will bail us out. In fact, I had news to share, and I'm going to have to wait until I get more organized to give all the real information on this and work it into the morning posts. But I guess the exciting news that I can share, even though I'm not prepared with all of the details, is we are on another radio station. So that means if Armando comes on and curses up a storm, we're in trouble with more than one outlet. We, of course... well, you know what? I haven't checked in a long time to see, are we still on We Act Radio? I hope so. There was one day I know that, somebody ran a quick check, and, I don't know whether it was something technically wrong or what. We weren't airing. So who knows? Maybe we're not even on there and haven't been for a year and we can't tell. However, we're on a, new station up in Rochester, and the big plan when they launched our show, which was yesterday, was to say hi and welcome to this fantastic new station, and thanks for everybody for listening. My name's David Waldman. I am a contributing editor at Daily Kos. That's dailycoastkos.com, in case you've never run into it online, although my understanding is with their launching with a brand new progressive format up there in Rochester, it's likely that anybody tuning in has, in fact, run across Daily Kos, and that would be great news if that were the case. We are on WRFZ, a low-power FM station. Low power in terms of, I don't know whatever that power thing, but high power in terms of content, to be certain. And we're trying to help out with that. For the time being, I think through June, will be Tuesday through Friday. It won't change anything for those of you listening elsewhere. We're still doing a Monday show. It's just that they already have a Monday show who is transitioning to a new spot in their lineup. But true to like any good progressive, he has a lot of guests booked that can't be rebooked, and so he's going out of his way to produce his Monday show, and we're going out of our way to stay out of his way or her way. I don't even know whose show it is, but it's probably pretty damn good. But yeah, WRFZ in Rochester. I'd give you the numbers, but they're not in front of me because I'm discombobulated because my refrigerator is broken. But we can deal. We can live with it. I'll give you, and we'll run it down. If you're already listening on WRFZ, then you don't need to know. And this information is given out on a need-to-know basis only. We're not particularly serious about almost anything. However, all the topics we do cover are serious and, for the most part, real news. We do try to stick to that. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Greg Dworkin, you'll have to call him doctor for the first year or so that you're listening in Rochester. Afterwards, we'll consider you good friends. You can call him Greg. He'll call in from Connecticut because you'll find him on Twitter as Democrat from Connecticut, CT, really, because we try to abbreviate on Twitter. You'll find me as KagroX, K-A-G-R-O-X. It doesn't mean anything in particular. I could explain the story to you. But then I'd have to, I don't know what, I'd have to move to Rochester, I guess, and tell you all about it. And if you've got any good appliance places in Rochester, let me know. It'll be easier to move there, minus this damn refrigerator. Anyway, and it's hot outside today, too. Warm weather coming. Of course, that's how you know that there's global warming. If the temperature today out there is warmer than usual, then it's real. Otherwise, the science is still out. If it snows, forget about it. You know how these things go. All right. Let's try and organize our thoughts. I don't think that there's any morning outrage from the president. I think they either took away the phone last night or managed to get through to him the seriousness of the situation he now finds himself in. Yesterday, of course, another big day's development, and another day wherein the morning outrage was outdated by the afternoon, and we had learned something new and horrible by the end of the day. And yesterday's new and horrible by the end of the day, I think we're all agreed. And I will not have picked up yet on whether or not that has changed this morning. But Comey memos emerging yesterday, thanks to the reporting of the New York Times, and we'll discuss a little bit about that and Republican reaction to it. This, of course, should surprise no one who understands that Comey is A, a lawyer, and B, a government lawyer, and C, a longtime government lawyer at all of that. The fact that there are people who are surprised that Comey would have memorialized all of his meetings with the president, and all of the presidents at that, in memos to the file is really astounding. But I guess a lot of people don't know how that works, or maybe just don't live in that world, or what have you, or they're just used to taping everything like you're Donald Trump. Trump, of course, threatened Comey the other day with the possible existence of tapes, or quote unquote tapes anyway, of their discussions, intimating, I guess, to those who for some reason didn't know that that Jim Comey would be keeping these kinds of meticulous notes, that perhaps a recording of their discussion might reveal that his recounting of the meeting between the two of them face to face over dinner was in fact different from what happened. I doubt that very much. And of course, I guess the memo that was causing the biggest stir was not the dinner memo, but a subsequent meeting in the White House in February, in which Trump just basically comes right out and says, "Hey, I want you to stop with this investigation with Flynn now that he has resigned." I guess it was the day after he had been fired / resigned. I don't remember how does the Trump people categorize it. But I guess now that he was out of government, Trump, just kind of wondering, would Comey maybe let it go? And Comey went home and wrote this up in a memo and put it in the file, as he would have done with any meeting. And somehow people are astonished that this happened. And now I guess the morning spin is Trump didn't actually ask him to drop the investigation. He just asked him if he could let it go, like to the bathroom. Can it go I'll come back. I don't know what he's trying to pull with this except to wiggle out of this, but I don't know. So far he hasn't tweeted, and I imagine that means he's either trapped under maybe his refrigerator fell over on top of him, or he's paralyzed with fear, or they've just revoked the phone, or he really just woke up. Today was the day he became president. He figured out, I could really get myself in some serious trouble. Not really sure what it is. Let me hand it over to Greg here with a warning, Greg. Well, first, good morning, Greg, and then a warning.
Good morning.
Greg.
How are you? And good morning, Rochester.
Thank you. And thank you, says Rochester. I already have a note from Armando that he's got to get on.
Yes. For those of you new listeners in Rochester, or for those older listeners who don't know,
yes.
Armando and David and I are good friends, brothers. We go back a long, long way. Armando and I tend to argue a bit. David is usually the mediator here. But we're all good friends, so don't worry about it if he comes on and tells me I'm wrong.
Yes.
It happens all the time.
It does happen. They've been friends, we've all been friends since before this refrigerator, which is a long, long time. And
yes.
Really,
sorry about the refrigerator too.
Thank you. I appreciate
But a lot is going on, and I have to
freezer.
tell you, in the last 12
yes.
to 24 hours, there's been a sea change, a change in the zeitgeist.
Oh.
We've gone from, everybody knows that as bad as Trump is and all the other bad stuff that's happening, and I don't know if you heard, but Putin offered to give us a transcript of that Lavrov-Kisilak meeting in the White House because Putin has it. And Adam Schiff came on this morning and said, at the moment, I'm not really sure that Putin vouching for Trump is exactly in the White House's best interest at the moment. Because we've gone from, we know that Republicans are supporting Trump no matter what, and the base supports him, in 12 to 24 hours is, let's talk about impeachment. And what would be the better mechanism, the traditional way or the 25th Amendment, or how do we get rid of this guy?
Right. I remember when
it's been astounding how quick the Republicans in Congress have turned. It's not that they're ready to impeach him, don't get me wrong, but you have Jason Chaffetz, who runs the House Oversight Committee, sending a memo over to Jeff Sessions saying, hey guys over there in Justice, we want a copy of every single memo that James Comey has written. We want them all. We want to get to the truth. We want to know what's going on here. Remember, Chaffetz is not running in 2018, and he wants to run for Utah governor.
True also. And again, this did remind me yesterday, goes to the importance of what happened to Comey's office, papers, personality, server passwords, etc. after he was fired.
They belong to the Justice Department.
Yeah. Do we trust the integrity of those papers to this Justice Department? It'll be interesting to see what comes out of there. He probably does. We hope so. Although then there'll be the first 24 hours of finding out that he has copies will be he has classified information in his house.
But that's okay because this stuff goes beyond 24 hours.
Oh, dang. Okay.
And it's just astounding. I mean, I put together the pundit roundup yesterday in the afternoon. By evening, I had to completely rewrite it. We had the healthcare poll that came out from PPP, not just the healthcare poll.
Oh my!
But healthcare puts the House in play, and the Democrats are plus 11 in terms of the generic ballot. But they included a really interesting thing, and this is before the Comey story about the memo came out. We haven't seen the memo yet. Only 40% of voters approve of the job Trump is doing, to 54% who disapprove. For the first time, we find more voters, 48%, in support of impeaching Trump than there are 41% opposed to the idea.
Well.
So it's only one poll, but when stuff like that starts to happen.
How many do you want?
Yeah. There's the story in McClatchy from Alex Rorty. Worried about fallout, Dems poised to poll test impeachment. These operatives acknowledge they've been caught off guard by the speed in which impeachment has become a relevant issue and are wary of the political damage it could cause if not handled correctly. So you could see people like Angus King on TV this morning saying, we have to approach this carefully. It's very wrenching. You don't just do this. On the other hand, we have to do this.
Okay. By the way, I have this breaking news from Kate Sherrill. Thank you for tipping us off on this one. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis has collapsed while running in a charity road race in D.C., so
that's bad.
Best to him. Hopefully, nothing.
Hopefully, it's just
terrible.
heat exhaustion. He gets a little hydrated.
It's very warm today, and
Thank you for that.
I want to be up to date on that news so we don't miss out on that one.
Right. These are all from the pundit roundup this morning, by the way. The things that I'm reading to you, and these are some of the newer ones that I put together. So we'll just give you a quick summary here before we go on to talk about stuff Armando wants to or anything else. But this one is from Jonathan Chait. It's called Trump's protective Republican wall in Congress cracks, which I think is an important concept there. The Republican Congress has surrounded the Trump administration with a protective wall. Congress is far, far away from the majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate necessary to impeach and remove a president of their own party. But the policy of shutting down all oversight or investigation is no longer tenable. A few days ago, impeachment and removal seemed inconceivable. Suddenly, it isn't.
Oh. Yeah. And by the way, there was a lot of groundwork done on impeachment for a previous president.
Yes.
That has made it sort of
everybody's starting to see circulating the impeachment articles that were drawn up for Richard Nixon.
Yes.
And comparing them to what Trump is doing now, which is, by the way, not a very good comparison for Trump.
Yeah, it's not a good one. I have a feeling that we would have gotten to this place eventually anyway, just purely based on what Trump is about and what he's doing and the way he's handling things. But it didn't hurt that that Democrats and progressives have wrestled with the weight of impeachment in between the two.
Yes.
And we've had a situation where and it seems now to in the distance of memory pale by comparison, but there were some very serious issues before, but there was some real consideration given to, well, at least what does it really mean to get out there and talk about impeachment publicly? It's even the discussion of it isn't taken lightly anymore.
You're moving the Overton window if you're into those sort of things.
Yes.
So will the GOP fall into the enthusiasm gap? Amy Walter writes. Just looking at the top line approval rating number to assess Trump's support from the base misses a very important element, the enthusiasm behind that support. You got your enthusiasm thing ready?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. If my refrigerator
Hello,
doesn't
Rochester.
work,
You'll
want to
find
know
out
if
what
this
we're talking
works.
about in a minute.
Okay.
And on that front, there's been some very clear bleeding for Trump.
On what
Survey
topic?
Monkey polling puts Trump's overall approval rating at 43 with an 88% approval among Republicans. Good, right? But
Yes.
Survey Monkey's Mark Blumenthal notes that while our overall approval trend lines have remained reasonably steady, Trump's strong approval has dipped a bit since taking office. A lot of that drop came from Republicans who fell 6 points from 61% in February to 55% in April. Even among the core Trump cohort, older white non-college and men, the percentage of those who strongly disapprove of the president is higher or equal to those who strongly approve of the job he's doing. That's among core Trump cohorts. So the point there is that the base is not invulnerable, and Jonathan Chait is right. Yes, it can crack. Had a funny one here. Fox News, by the way, who's running third behind MSNBC and CNN in the evening hour demo these days, they're not covering, Fox News in general is not covering the Comey memo and the scandals.
I saw that.
Here's a tweet from Rick Wilson. A Mediaite has a piece that says, "This is a boring scandal," says Fox News' Jesse Waters.
Yeah, sure.
Nothing to see here, Brigade. And Rick Wilson tweeted in response a link. I'm going to give you the tweet and I'm going to give you the link because the link is hysterical. I opened it up and I started to laugh. You'll see why. Here is the original tweet. Here is the link. The link is to a Wikipedia page entitled Musicians of the RMS Titanic. Apparently their job was to calm the passengers.
Yes, right.
So they kept playing right until the boat went down.
Okay, right, yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty good analogy for Rick to say, yeah, you guys on Fox are saying everything's okay, that's fine. There's a widely distributed article today.
It's a good band name.
It is. It's a great band name.
And they were a band, so.
Musicians of the Titanic. So the 25th Amendment solution to remove Trump is written by Ross Douthat. It's kind of a twin column to the David Brooks one from earlier in the week, both of which are very unhappy conservatives comparing Trump to a child, but talks about how maybe removal rather than impeachment might be the way to go. I think it's a silly idea for a lot of reasons. Rick Hasen writes, hot take, today's 25th Amendment talk is like the July talk of a brokered Republican convention. It ain't happening. And part of the reason is you have to depend upon the cabinet members to do this, if I understand this correctly. You and Armando are the lawyers. I'm just a doctor, but my understanding is the cabinet has to say it's okay to do, and they're all his people, so why would they?
Yeah, they're not like, They're not likely to do it. In a normal situation, you don't have this, but in a normal situation, you also have cabinet members who, I guess, are at least motivated by the fact that they're in the line of succession, so they might not be, averse to all of this. But none of these guys want this job, I don't think. I mean, Sessions will
right. That's the other thing. Maybe they just will do it because they all can get out. Because I don't think Trump wants to be president either. Is Armando available to come in and talk to us?
Yeah, let's check it out by talking about it and waiting. That's my methodology. Here we go. It worked. All right, let's add him to the mix here. Armando.
Are you there, Armando?
I am here.
Okay.
Yay, how are you?
Good. Good morning.
Say hi to Rochester.
Happy impeachment day.
Hey, Armando, is your refrigerator running?
It is. Trump hasn't gotten mine yet.
Okay.
I'm worried. I'm thinking my microwave is looking at me. I don't know.
Oh, well, it's listening carefully. Yeah, so
well,
I could
taking
do prank
pictures
calls
of it,
to everybody and ask them if their refrigerators are running, and if they say yes, I'll say, "Can I put a quart of milk in it?"
Right. So put your pants on and come on the show.
I'm actually in need of a refrigerator. Okay.
It's funny. I'm not wearing pants as we speak.
Well, all right. See you later.
Too much information.
Thank you.
But I want to call in to tell the story about EJD. But before that, I have a very penetrating insight on your story about that
Walter
poll.
Piece about the Trump poll?
Yeah.
This pants thing is getting worse.
I think it's something people need to start thinking about.
All right.
Trump wanted a lot of we think of as infrequent voters, irregular voters. Right?
They are irregular, yes.
Some of them.
I mean, compared to other Republicans, Trump captured a larger share of irregular voters.
Irregular voters, rural voters who don't always turn out.
Okay.
Right.
That's
so when you look at his approval numbers and things like that, I think when you factor that into a midterm where Trump's not on the ballot, and you have a Republican Party that is going to be at best ambivalent about Trump, I'm not sure the turnout. I mean, he talks about enthusiasm gap, and I buy into that, but I think the nature of the voter that is making up Trump's approval is going to be important, because whether they approve of Trump or not for whatever reason, are they going to approve a Republican Party that's going to make noises that are at least vaguely disapproving of Trump?
Well, that's where the healthcare part comes in, because it's been my contention that the healthcare debate is far more important for 2018 and dealing with those voters than the impeachment talk.
I'm not sure. I think the impeachment talk matters. I guess I'm trying to.
They both matter, but healthcare is something that they may vote on.
Yeah, but think of it this way: you're a Trump enthusiast. You're an irregular voter. Mm-hmm. The choices on the ballot are going to be Democrats who hate Trump and Republicans who are not defending Trump. Is that voter going to turn out?
I hope not.
I'm not saying they're going to vote Democrat. I'm saying I think a lot of them.
Yeah, because if you have a voter that's not going to support Trump, why should that person come out at all? I'm not even sure they show up in 2018 anyway. It's an off year.
I think that too, but I also think it may be even more pronounced because there's no rallying around. At least it looks like as of today. Maybe they'll get back in rallying around Trump mode when it gets closer to the election. But as we speak, they can't get a Republican to go on TV to defend him.
This morning, they actually asked 20 people to go on CBS. Nobody would. And that's happened before to defend healthcare on MSNBC. Oh, yes. So here's the thing. Josh Kraushaar had a kind of interesting column, which I had in the pundit roundup today, and was talking about, again, another, the base isn't solid. There's a ton of those articles out today based on what's happening with the Comey memo story. And Kraushaar's point is that for Republicans, they don't lead. They're the guys that run out in front of the parade. And as long as they're being pushed by their base, it's very hard for them to desert Trump and deal with some of this stuff. But on the other hand, that's not all of them. This is the argument Armando and I have all the time. There's a difference between the Trump rally voters and the general Trump voter. Those can be picked off, the general Trump voter. And some of those, in fact, will take their cues from Republican politicians. So, if you want to put numbers on it, maybe 85% of Trump voters will tell the Republicans in Congress what they want. The other 15%, if they see Republicans in Congress wavering, they themselves will at least consider the possibility of wavering themselves. So it's not all base driving politicians. It's mostly, but not all. To some extent, you take your cues from, because you don't know. You're a low information voter. You don't know what to think. You take your cues from Fox News, and you take your cues from what your Republican leaders are saying.
Yeah,
and if the leaders say we need to have a oversight committee subpoena the Comey letters, which, by the way, are far more simple to understand. Obstruction of justice and blocking something is far more simple to understand than Russia-Trump business ties. Then, you might pay attention to it.
Yeah, I hear all that, and I agree with everything you say. I think I like to think my point's a little different. And it's this. Remember,
Armando's only being nice to me because of Rochester. Thank you, Rochester.
Hello, Rochester.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you can be your normal self. You can just tell me I'm wrong.
What do they do at the concerts? Hello, Cleveland. Hello,
Yes.
Rochester.
Right.
All right. But I have a data point in my favor. At
That's
Kansas 4, the race was close, or much closer than historically.
Yes.
Largely because of tremendous drop-off in Republican voting.
Thanks a lot to Sam Brownback in a terrible economy in Kansas.
I agree, but now it's not the same complication, but there is a complication in the midterms.
Yes, the Republican agenda is incredibly unpopular with voters.
I get that too, but I guess I'm too Trump-centric. But there is, I think, in both bands of Republican voters, there is voters who, will hate Trump and believe he needs to be checked. I mean, on the Republican side.
Yeah.
And there will be voters who will be, I think, dissatisfied that their Republican candidate is not offering a full-throated defense to Trump.
Yes.
I think it's going to affect both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Candidates.
I think that's fair. People have made the point, and I think it's right, that to a certain extent right now, given everything that's happened, core Trump voters who still strongly support him basically support him because he hates liberals. And so if you don't get your full-throated, I hate liberal,
I think
comment,
the anti-Trump movement is
which is what it's called,
steam, right? Yeah. Is what you're getting. And I think that's losing
right now.
steam.
Yeah. That's where it is right now. And I think that's changing. And I think over the last week, a lot of this has changed, and it's going to change still between now and November 2018. So I don't think you can win on that, even though maybe you thought you could a month ago.
Right. I mean, as I think a very clever title, I think Mark Sumner wrote the story, 11 Days in May. Obviously evoking the 7 Days in May movie title. It has changed a lot, I think. But you know what? We thought that before. So let's see what happens. I think the difference is Comey's not going away, and he probably has many more memos.
Yes, I'm sure he does. In fact, his friends have said that he does.
That's all he does.
Here's another interesting one. This comes from Evan Siegfried, who is a conservative, used to work for Rudy Giuliani until he saw the light, and made the point that Comey was baiting Congress a bit. He put out the story about the memo and basically said, subpoena me. Subpoena them all. I would love to come to Congress and talk to you because you guys called me there and in public and tell you everything. Do it.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yesterday afternoon, I guess they were just at a loss for exactly how to respond to these things. I saw, was it Senator Risch had, is that right how he pronounces it? I have no idea. I think about it, but spent the afternoon saying that the New York Times has an obligation, that that's now the burden is on them to produce the memo.
What happened is, if I recall the story correctly, and of course our Twitter feed will correct us, is that Richard Burr said,
that's right,
the head of the Intelligence Committee,
I'm sorry,
said in the Senate, said that it's up to the Times to produce the memo. What Risch said was the worst possible thing that could be happening in our country are people trying to undermine Trump. And the real traitors are the leakers.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah. That the real traitors were the people who had alerted the press that Trump had leaked this information. It wasn't that he had given it to the Russians. It was that somebody had told the press. Now, of course, somebody had already told the press before that, and it was Trump. He told TASS, the wrong press, but they were in on the meeting. So the idea that that it had been leaked to the press by somebody here in the United States who was trying to undermine Trump, Trump is his own worst enemy. That's true. But then Burr's comments I thought were kind of bizarre too. And everybody pointed out, well, you have the power to subpoena these things. You don't need to depend on the New York Times to produce them. But I was a little puzzled even by just throwing that out there. Just for the sake of argument, What obligation would the New York Times have to you or anyone else to produce this memo? They reported the existence of the memo. You don't believe it exists. You go get it if you don't think it exists. Well, I don't think the Times is telling the truth. Well, then don't buy the New York Times. I don't know why that translates into you have to do my homework for me.
Right. As a matter of fact, Charles C.W. Cook, who is a senior editor at the NRO, National Review, and I were talking about this online. Now, believe me, he's not a soulmate, but we both agreed this is a stupid thing for people to say. Congress, if you are worried about what the memo shows, subpoena it. You have that power. Yes. Go ahead and do it. It's time. And so you have conservatives, you have progressives, you have everybody. GOP Representative Lance, one of the Tuesday Group guys, on the Comey memo this morning. This is a serious matter. Congress has a responsibility to investigate. FASO said that. Comstock said that. Corbello from Florida, I believe, said that. I mean, there's just a long, growing list of people who are breaking from Trump and saying, yeah, you got to look at this. You can't just ignore this. This is too big.
Well, I'm glad that they're going about doing it. I just, it was a weird fallback position for Burr to take, in particular because he has his own.
Burr was weird. That was a bizarre thing to say. I think it was because he felt unprepared. He's one of these guys that I don't want to do this job. You're making me do this job. I'm going to give you a grumpy answer. And then tomorrow after I think about it, I'll give you a better answer. And Risch's response to blame the leaker, I think is like last week's news and he hasn't been paying attention and hasn't caught up to where the rest of the public is.
Right.
Yeah, well, he's from Idaho too.
No offense, I mean, I'm sure he's representing, parts of Iowa where Joan lives.
Idaho.
That's the best joke ever.
She always gets mad at me when I say that.
Damn it, Iowa is not Iowa. All right. Okay, so we're up to date on...
It's Wednesday. I was hoping she would come on and correct us. But.
Yes, well, eventually.
Let me tell this story about E.J. Dion and Greg.
Okay, yes.
I was at the CAP conference yesterday, the Ideas Conference, which was the idea was
to have a conference.
Don't get mad at me, Neera Tanden. I love Neera Tanden. I'm Team Neera. But the whole Ideas Conference was the idea was of having a bunch of politicians give speeches.
That's an idea.
It wasn't so much ideas, but it was interesting.
It was networking. It was people to meet each other.
Yeah, it really was, and it's good. That's a good thing to do.
Yes.
Afterwards, I don't know. I walked in and out, and Marcus was there, by the way, and did very well. And
I watched his panel. It was actually broadcast. So
where was it? It was in D.C. I don't know where it was.
It was in D.C. Okay. Yeah, it was at the Four Seasons.
Ah, how nice! Not Trump.
Very fancy, yes.
Right.
And I was out in the some lobby area of the hotel, and people were wandering around, and I'm playing around with my phone doing something or other. And E.J. Dion walks up and says, "Do you mind if I sit here? I'm going to make some calls. I don't want to disturb you if you're doing work." And I was like, no, please sit down. And he makes his call. When he gets off his call, I introduced myself to him. I said, "Listen, you may not know me, but I'm the guy who ripped you badly in Daily Coast, but I wanted to let you know that I generally enjoy your work." And EJ goes, "Oh, you're from Daily Coast?" Yes. "Oh, yeah, I remember that." He's incredibly nice about it. I've said these awful things about him. And the guy could not be nicer. And anyway, Greg, he's a pro. He brings up Greg. Oh. And he says, "Oh, so you know Greg Dworkin." Or he calls you Den from Connecticut, he called you, actually.
Yeah, we've been pen pals for a long time, so that's what
and I said, he's great guy. He says, "Yes, I've been talking, pen paling with Greg for a long time. What a thoughtful guy. He and I discuss things all the time. What a incisive thinker. And I'm amazed, for those who don't know in the audience, Greg is a pretty prominent doctor in Connecticut, runs a pediatric. Greg, you could tell, so I don't mangle your biography, but
I'm a lung doc.
Yeah, he's an incredibly accomplished guy who messes around with us misfits over here at Daily Coast. He couldn't have said praise. He went on and on about you, Greg, for 10 minutes. It was unbelievable.
You're right. He's a super nice guy.
All kidding aside, Greg is both insightful and incredibly gracious and a very thoughtful person. And while I say he's wrong all the time, because he often is, all those things are true. And E.J. Dion recognizes that. And by the way, E.J. Dion is all those things as well.
Yeah, he is.
Though he often is wrong like Greg.
Yeah. The thing I like about EJ, and the reason we started talking in the first place, is he takes a historian's view to a lot of the stuff that he talks about. And I've reviewed a couple of his books, and they're sourced, they're footnoted, and that's a lot of the stuff that we wind up talking about. And at one point in doing the review, give you an idea of how nice he is, I emailed him and I said, I'd like to review your book and maybe do a 4 or 5 email question interview for the book. And he said, don't do that. Call me. I want to talk to you. I really want to hear your voice. It's much easier to do an interview if I can talk to you. Uh-huh. So we were on the phone for like 3 hours talking about stuff that had nothing to do with the book, but whatever was going on in politics at the time. And that's just the way he is.
My friend Tom Watson, who you might know from the internet, he's a big Hillary supporter, and he's very much in the...
Your friend Tom Watson grew up in Yonkers, where I grew up.
That's right. Uh-huh. And
I know Tom.
Tom's talking about the IDC situation. For those who don't, well, if you're Rochester would know. Well, Rochester wouldn't know because it's more of a New York thing, it's downstate New York thing, but they might know. IDC is this group of break-off Democrats who caucus with Republicans and give Republicans control of the state Senate in New York.
IDC stands for I don't care.
And
I'm going to vote for whoever I want to, and I'm going to ruin everything. And if you Democrats don't like it, I don't care.
And we were talking about, Tom and I were talking about the New York 24 race. EJ had to go back on the phone for a little bit. And we're talking about this race and what's going on and everything else. And then, EJ, while on the phone, chimes in, no, you guys should go get that race, and all of a sudden he's talking about the 24th district.
Right, tells the phone, hang on, I got to talk to these guys for a minute. I'll be right
about
back.
The 24th district in New York State Senate.
Not that
so
he's a
just like you said,
right
3
now.
hours, and we literally sat there with him for 90 minutes, just talking about everything.
Yep. And I think, the illustrative story isn't like we're cool kids and we know all these people. There's a lot of stuff going on that you don't necessarily see in the newspapers. We cover the headlines in the morning and we try to cover the big stories. Obviously, this Comey memo is huge. But there is an incredible amount of Democratic enthusiasm. There are people working behind the scenes. Armando has covered in detail the very fact that the Democratic Party and who we are made up of women and people of color and other folks you don't necessarily see on cable TV or don't necessarily read about it in the paper. It's all there, and it's all happening every day. And, by November 2018, even the Republicans are starting to recognize this enthusiasm gap, and they're quite worried about it.
Yeah,
I read an interesting thing the other day, which I scratched my head at. They said, I think it was Eric Erickson, who himself is from Georgia, said that, it's really going to be a problem with this enthusiasm. We don't have it, and they do. We may lose Montana, although I think we're going to win Georgia. I think it's the other way around, but, it was an interesting comment of his.
Well, you think we're going to win Montana?
I think, no, he does.
Oh,
he thought
does.
we were going to win Montana and lose Georgia. I think we're going to lose Montana, but make it closer than people think and win Georgia.
Yeah, Steve Bullock, the governor of Montana, was at the event, and to prove my bona fides to the new Rochester audience of what a curmudgeon and hater I am, I didn't really care for his speech. And what really bothered me, but then someone, this will be a corollary E.J. Dion story. He didn't mention Quist in his speech at all, not once, and I actually tweeted that out. And I mentioned this in our conversation with Tom and I were talking, and EJ interjected. I think there was a 501c4 issue that you couldn't talk about specific races. I went through my mind and I realized, no one was talking about any specific races at the event, and there you go.
Because 501c3s can and 501c4s cannot. Is that correct?
C3s can.
You guys are the lawyers. I'm just the doctor.
C4s they can make some. They have more leeway in C4.
They can do issues, but they
They
can't
can do issues,
campaigns.
but they can't do campaigns, and C3s can do campaigns, but, it's a different tax,
Right.
I'm not sure about the Cs. I don't think the C3s can do anything, actually, but the C4s can do issues.
Education, as they
right.
like to term it. Yeah, they should all be 501H anyway, so never
I
mind.
think the 529s can do campaigns, but that I could be wrong on all of that. Adam Boner would know that chapter and verse, and
Oh, yeah.
too bad we don't have him instead of me. But
Real people would know. I like to throw out the terms and make it sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't. But I do know that 501c4s really can't do campaigns. They can't endorse individual candidates, for example.
They can't endorse
Neither of the
individual
C's can do that. Can endorse. So there's that. C4 is more flexible in that you can do issue education and dance right up to the edge of it. And if you're a Republican, you can go straight past it to say, well, I don't endorse Jones. I just hate Smith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Say, well, maybe he could have done a whole. Well, he did talk about his opponent in the governor's race. Now that I think about it, and that was Quist's opponent.
I can't talk about me or the people I like, but I can tell you my opponent sucks.
I can tell you the people.
In other words, that
system.
reads exactly like conservative media these days because, when you pick that up, I was reading again that Eric Erickson piece I quoted to you. Him and Noah Rothman and some of the other conservatives who I just read to keep track of will almost always, and it's just an interesting side anecdote here because it's Kagro in the morning and sometimes we wonder, but they were talking about how Trump is really in trouble and, he's losing certain aspects of this, that, or he's wrong on that. But they always start, whether it's National Review or whether it's, commentary with Noah Rothman or the resurgent Eric Erickson site, they always start with one or two paragraph lead-ins on how progressives suck, or it's terrible that they ignored when Obama or Clinton did it, but now they're picking on Trump. And then they'll get on to the meat of what they're talking about, some of which is interesting. And I made a comment on that today on Twitter and said, it really gets tiresome, although I'm used to it, to read about how progressives suck and then you get around to the meat of what they're trying to talk about. And some of my conservative friends wrote and said, you have to do that. And the reason you have to do that is if you want that particular audience, because you're not the audience, if you want that audience to follow to the end of the article, you have to start with that at the beginning. And I said, okay, fine. If that's what they're doing and that's all they're doing, I'll buy that. I'll ignore it. I'm commenting on it. I think it's funny, but maybe that's true. And that just goes on to say that as much and as delightful and persuasive EJ and Armando and David and I are, we're not going to reach that audience. No. And if those are the guys that are, and they have to bash us in order to get to what we want them to say, I'm fine with that.
I understand it.
I understand it. Yeah. I'm not going to love it.
Right.
I'm laughing at it every time I see it because it's so silly. But I understand it. And it's always nice understanding things.
It's a thing we ought to do from time to time.
Yep. We ought to try. All right. I get where you're coming from. You're completely wrong, but at least I get it.
Yeah. Well, it's like any liturgy, and there's a recitation that has to be.
Yeah, it's pretty much what it is. And it's almost by rote, and it's almost a catechism. It's really kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's a good explanation for it. Wouldn't mind, seeing them drop it, but okay.
So, I understand Greg's point, but, Trump at this point. I mean, come on.
Really, it trumps everything.
I mean, there's enough. The reason why I'm going to push back just a bit on this, Greg. There are a number. They were always never Trumpers.
Yes,
it's true.
Yeah,
but there is a critical mass now of Republicans, people with established credentials as Republicans who are just saying, "What are you talking about? This is, a crisis, and we don't have time for your liturgies. We've got to take on Trump."
Well, that's happened in the last 24, 48 hours. Again, I think that the ground has really shifted. There's a Philip Bump piece I have in the Pundit Roundup today. Trump's careening toward an inevitable showdown with an undeniable truth. And the path of the past 10 days has been toward less and less wiggle room and more direct contrast between Trump and some other trustworthy outside individual. That's the moment of tension that's been building since Trump announced his candidacy, always pitting him against imperfect foils like Cruz or Clinton or the mainstream media. Eventually, seemingly inevitably, that wave will crash into a wall, he says, And I say that time is now. And so that's the point that you were making. You can't just like go with this stuff anymore. At some point, you have to say, look, forget about Clinton, forget about Obama, forget about what you think about progressives. Trump is doing this, and this is bad for us, and it's in our self-interest to like get to the heart of the matter and do something about it. Of course, we don't know what to do, but that's the case.
Now, and I think I'm going to give some advice to them. They need to start telling Republicans that recognizing that Trump is a problem. And let's say the worst comes to worst and he's removed. Mike Pence becomes president. Republicans should be happy about that.
They should, although he'll be damaged goods, just like Ford was. I mean, it's inevitable. There's going to be an element to that. In Pence's case, I think he's going to be even more damaged because he's not all that popular outside of the evangelicals.
No, he's not. And of course, I mean, there's lots of damage everywhere for him, and that he's been out front, and he's been the guy that's sent out to try and deal with all of this nonsense, everything that comes up with Trump. And he turns out to, everybody lies to Mike Pence. I don't know how that happens. I'm not certain how that.
We were talking about that on Monday, which annoys me. It's because the media takes the approach that, oh, poor Pence, he's always lied to, he's a victim. Hardly.
I mean, he signed on, certainly, willingly enough. But, do you want that guy as president? Well, certainly not going to make that choice initially. The one that I just don't know what happens. Everybody around me is lying. And then when I replace them, the next person lies to me, too. I never can tell what the truth is.
I can't trust anybody, can I?
Well,
anyway, with that little bit of a roundup and watching the news, and today's going to be watching Republican reaction, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friends and brothers Armando Lorenz and David Waldman, whose show it actually is. Sometimes we let them talk.
I am here.
Yeah, you are. Sorry about your refrigerator. Hope that gets fixed soon. But hopefully John will come on later, talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress. And I will be back tomorrow, and we'll talk again. And Armando will be back as the currents bring him.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And in fact, David, I have to exit with Greg as well.
That is fine.
I have to. Okay. I have to get I have to go drive to Fort Lauderdale.
Oh well, all right.
So unfortunately, I can't give you any sound effects for crashing.
Oh, I can help you with that.
Just drive safe. I was important.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Armando.
Yeah, and take care, David, and I'll talk to you.
All right. Very good. Good kickoff today for, although we introduced ourselves yesterday to Rochester. I just forgot to say that we were introducing ourselves to Rochester yesterday. By the way, found the numbers if you're listening, some other way and you're thinking about how fun it would be because you live in Rochester and some of the nearer suburbs to tune in on terrestrial radio, and you're listening via the internet, but you also somehow miraculously don't have access to Google. It's really just for my own sense of peace of mind here. I want to let everybody know it's 106.3 FM in Rochester, or of course you can listen online, and not only through our player here at Netroots Radio, our home carrier, if you will, but also through RochesterFreeRadio.com is where you'll find the station's website, RochesterFreeRadio.com, and then of course they also have their own live stream. And if you just want to go straight to it, like take me right to the button, I don't want to see anything else about RochesterFreeRadio.com. Well, okay, RochesterFreeRadio.com/listen will save you at least one click if you're into that sort of thing. But I would suggest taking a look at the website to begin with, just to get a sense of what they're all about. Nice local radio station started up by a couple of guys who just thought there should be some progressive radio in Rochester, and did what it takes to put the damn thing together, and shoestring budget, and we're helping out the best we can by providing some morning content. So welcome to everybody there. Move on over to the terrestrial radio just for some kicks to to listen a different way. And by the way, do check out the website and take a look at the rest of the lineup there. A lot of local content as well. You can't beat it. All right. And if you need access to that national content, they've got a couple other national programs playing. And while you're visiting netrootsradio.com, take a look at their national lineup as well. I think you'll find your fill of progressive content there. And by the way, if there's progressive content that you're still longing for, and it isn't provided by national shows, well, remember this. We're not that national. I mean, you can pick us up anywhere because of the internet, yes, but we just put this thing together with the help of the tech and radio-loving folks at Netroots Radio. And we're doing this as a podcast out of houses, remotely. We're not all in one studio. We got some nice microphones. I don't think it sounds like we're all in the same room, but it sounds pretty good. Miracle of the Internet. That is to say, you can do it too. And if you are a Daily Kos reader or just a fan of this show or just a fan of other shows on Netroots Radio, you know that this is something you can do for yourself, something you can contribute to. Those of you who might be new in Rochester, I encourage you to think about this too. If there's content that you think belongs on a progressive radio station, put it there. You can do it if you're in the neighborhood of Rochester or anywhere else where you might be listening on progressive radio, or you might spend the rest of your day listening to progressive radio, but start your morning with our program. Think about talking to the program directors there about either carrying our show, but carrying your own show, maybe once a week, maybe a podcast format. Don't be intimidated by it. I happen to have bitten off far more than I can chew just because I'm crazy, and said, let me do it 2 hours a week, 5 days, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And by the way, that's not nearly enough time. It's just the amount of time I can stand to be away from the rest of my life, to talk about these things. I mean, I talk about it all day long, but you know, you got to get your errands done. So why don't you pick up the slack? But it doesn't have to be 2 hour bites. It doesn't have to be 1 hour. It doesn't have to be half an hour. These days with podcasts and the miracle of the internet, you can do what you can do. Do 15 minutes. Or if you don't even want to pick up that much, honestly, I am more than open to, and we very frequently do have, contributors who just say, there's an article that I just think needs coverage, or just something I wanted to give you that has a local perspective. Pick up the newspaper, pick up your smartphone, use one of the recording apps on there, read me the news, tell me what you think, make some comments. 5 minutes or so of reading and discussion or information. It can be a little bit more, a little bit less, and email it to me. And you can find me just like you can on Twitter at KagroX, K-A-G-R-O-X. You can just add a gmail.com to the end and email me your file. We'll make sure that you haven't done anything that's going to lose the license for our good friends at Rochester Free Radio or We Act Radio here in Washington, D.C. area. And why not? We're always interested in someone else's perspective. And hey, 5 minutes of break time for me, it's no small thing. So we do this all the time, and I encourage you to join the ranks and think about whether you want to do it regularly. Think about doing it whenever you can. Think about doing it for yourself and doing your own podcast and adding your voice to the progressive chorus. Now's the time. Don't be afraid of it. That's all I can tell you. All right. Thanks, though, to the folks in Rochester for picking us up for 2 hours at a time and helping spread the word. What is the word that we're going to spread? Well, let's see. Oh, yes. Thank you. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded via Twitter by one of our frequent contributors who goes by the name of Canuck Pundit, Canadian Pundit on Twitter. You'll find the name, of course, Canuck_Pundit, but just reminding me, if you're looking to contact the show midstream, and you can by all means change the entire direction of the show by suggesting that one killer story. Maybe you don't want to read it to me. Maybe you can't read it to me. Maybe you don't have a smartphone. Maybe you don't have any more storage space on your smartphone like I do. Send us a note via Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, well, how can I help you? I mean, really, honestly, you got to contact me some way, but that's a pretty easy way. Use the hashtag KITM for our show, Kagro in the morning. I could have eliminated the T, but hashtag Kim gets me mixed up with too many things. And, tag your story. Send me a link. Tell me what's up. Tell me why you think it's interesting. add that hashtag and it lingers a little bit while longer on my screen. And we'll see what we can do about getting the word on the air. Speaking of things we needed to get on the air, where was this thing? I knew I put away somewhere in pocket, and you'll learn from listening to the show, Rochester. And really, honestly, I don't know, I don't know how big of an audience we're talking to on the first day that we acknowledge Rochester, but eventually it will grow. But the excuse for reminding everybody else of these things is Rochester. You'll learn very quickly that the things I put aside for discussion in my Pocket app are somehow just keep disappearing from my fingertips. The whole point of having this app was to keep stories for easy access, and then I can't find any of them ever. But I do have a reminder here to myself to bring up another app, which actually is, I think, quite important and interesting and useful in these serious times when we're frequently being called upon to call upon our members of Congress and express our discontent or vitriol, what have you, with respect to whether it's Trump care or it's time to impeach that guy already or whatever the issue is. We're constantly being exhorted to call our members of Congress, and there's a great app here brought to my attention by one of our loyal listeners, Levi Stringer, who you can are you interested in all following one another on Twitter one of these days? Anyway, I guess we could, he's String Levi, by the way, on Twitter. I don't know if he wants everybody bugging him about this or not, but at any rate, he brings to my attention this really interesting app called 5 Calls, and you can find it online without worrying about whether, downloading the app. You can take a look at the description of it. 5 Calls, the number 5, the numeral 5 Calls, CALLS.org. And real interesting. It identifies your location. I hope that won't freak everybody out, or your near location. And this app is a great thing, just sort of geared towards political activists who want to, not full-time political activists, but somebody who says, I really need to contact Congress. They got to hear my voice, whether it's about something specific, or maybe you're just saying, or maybe there's more you want to do. More than just call and complain about Trump care. What else is going on? It has some suggestions. And basically, it's an opportunity to plug in quickly. They know who you should be calling based on your location, and they even have suggestions about what you could be calling about and what you might want to say when you call. So take a look. Right now, I just opened up the page here, and we'll take a look at what they have to say. What will you find when you go to 5calls.org? Make your voice heard. Turn your passive participation into active resistance. That sounds pretty attractive, don't you think? Facebook likes and Twitter retweets can't create the change you want to see. Calling your government on the phone can. Spend 5 minutes, make 5 calls. A neat little tagline there, and a good way to jump in easily. If maybe you've been thinking, I really do have to become more active. I don't know. I kind of know how, but I don't have anything specific. I don't have any directions. 5calls.org looks like a great way to do it as far as I can tell. Let's see. And what do they have just by way of suggestions? What's important to you? They've got a little list of things here. Support the creation of independent commission for the investigation into, everything. Russia, the Trump situation. H.R. 356 is the bill number. Floor debate scheduled for that, by the way, for today. Perhaps something we'll take up with Joan McCarter, our senior political editor at Daily Kos, scheduled to join us in our second hour. What else is up? Protecting federal standards on health, the environment, and labor. There's a committee vote on that one on Wednesday. These are all hot topics of the day when you log in. It tells you not only who should you be talking to, but what you should be talking to them about. If these things interest you, check them off, and they'll tell you where to direct your fire, if you will. Blocking the confirmation of Associate Attorney General Rachel Brand. A final vote on that on Wednesday. Denounce Trump's disclosure of classified intelligence. Is that important to you? Should be. Department of Justice, don't resurrect the war on drugs. You might be willing to tell your members of Congress. Ensure adequate funding for an accurate 2020 census, another important issue not yet given enough attention. What else have we got? Halt the Midnight Rules Relief Act. A committee's vote on Wednesday. Stop the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S. Another committee vote slated for today. Of course, there's always our perennial Reject the American Health Care Act issue. Perennial, I say, for the last 3 weeks or so. And prevent Trump's attempts to suppress voting rights. And many more, obviously. You can just click on more. If there's not enough there that interests you, there are more suggestions to be had. Nice little note at the bottom tells us that what you do here is you contribute to help out with the costs associated of running 5 calls. That is another option available to you as well. Once you've tried it out, if you think it's an effective program, the suggestions that it makes for things to call about, people to call, and the way it provides even not just phone numbers, but also scripts. If you say, I am interested in this, but I get nervous. I'm not sure what to say when they answer the phone. I don't know what I'm talking about exactly. I know I'm worried about this issue, but what do I say? What's the jargon? They'll give you a script if you're interested in it. They'll tell you who your local representative is if by some chance you don't know. And interestingly, it keeps a running tally of how many calls it generates through its little engine here. It says, as a matter of fact, together we've made 1,339,053 calls. Pretty damn good for a little app that somebody put together for, gosh, I don't know how much, but I would assume that the technology is next to nothing. But to keep it up to date and keep it optimized for brand new issues every day, an interesting way to get the job done. But of course, I'm sure it costs them some money, so maybe you want to throw them a little coin. While I have your attention on that score, I might as well tell you that in addition to Rochester Free Radio being also in need of your support as well, and you'll find that out when you visit their website, keeping this show on the air. Although, I'll let you have this one for free, new listeners. But those of you who have been listening for a long time, I remind you once again, Patreon.com, Patreon, Patreon.com/KagroX, because that's me and my wacky blog name, and we keep it on the radio. That's the way to keep us on the air, up and running, with a monthly donation. And that's really the easiest, best, and most sustainable way to make sure that we can go forward in the future. I put a lot of time and effort into this. Everyone else who contributes to the show does as well. Well, I can just say it. I put in more. It's a major chunk of my day. And if we want to keep this thing going and do so as a vocation, it's going to take a little bit more than the drop in the bucket. But we're doing our best to build the audience, and the audience is doing their best to give back. And once we hit critical mass and can keep things going month to month, and as I say, prove to the family here at home that this is something that we can do, should do, need to pay attention to, needs to be taken seriously as a real vocation, well, that eases the pressure here at home for me. Anyway, I'll give you a more professional pitch in the coming days, no doubt about it. I really do need to get back to doing that, but I thank everyone who has been able to pitch in so far. Thanks so much for making it possible. We have got the token amounts in place to show great promise for the future, at any rate, and we'll keep going for the foreseeable future. But one of these days, the kids go to college, and stuff gets real, as they say. All right, back to the news. Let's see. Anything else happening that needs specific interruption for okay, so we don't need to interrupt the flow. Let's go back to the nuts and bolts of the Comey memo situation. I don't think much has changed, but for those of you who are wondering just what kind of memo are we talking about, what is this thing? I mean, if you haven't written a memo to the file about something yourself or not seen one, you might wonder, what is this guy doing that every time he has a meeting with the president or anyone important, he goes home and writes memos? So these things are important, of course, wherever you need to have a paper trail. And when you're dealing with high-level government functions, that comes with some fair frequency, especially when you're dealing with well, any president, really, because the chief business of the people surrounding the president is, of course, to cover that president's butt on just about anything, because he can be attacked for just about anything. And sometimes he needs to throw people under the bus, and sometimes you're just going to sit there and take it because it's the one thing that's expected of you. And other times it's unfair and or not good for the country to let that sort of thing happen. So I thought I'd grab this tweet that I saw fly by from Josh Gerstein, who is a Politico reporter. He's got an example of the kind of memo that Comey would send to himself just to sort of cover his own butt on these things, and also just to create a paper trail, because eventually, if you're dealing with somebody who's under investigation, it becomes important. What sort of contacts did you have with this person? And then, of course, if they intimate that you might have had further contact, but there's no memo about it, if you make a regular practice of memorializing the meetings and calls and discussions that you have with people who are either under investigation or people who are important to other investigations or whatever, and there's no memo for it, then that seriously calls into question whether that story about your meeting is really true. Let's see. By the way, and I see that Joan McCarter is having her own technical difficulties today. I don't think it's her refrigerator, it's her wireless. So we'll see, fingers crossed, whether wireless will come back on a line there at home for her to defend Idaho versus Iowa on the air here today. But let's see. We'll see whether we've got to carry the show across the finish line on our own. I do have a couple of, we've always got Joan's stories that we can look at over at Daily Kos and parse them ourselves, but it's so much nicer when she's there to join us for this. All right, so Josh Gerstein happens to have grabbed up a memo to the file on the Petraeus matter, when David Petraeus was under investigation. He also was in contact with Jim Comey, and Comey wisely memorialized it to file. Just a short blurb. We'll take a look at it. I don't know if this is the entire thing, but he's grabbed a screenshot here. This is dated November 7th, 2012. He puts it on FBI letterhead and everything. So it's just dated and says memo to file. Just like note to self, right? At approximately 8:15 a.m., see how careful he is, on November 7th, 2012. David Petraeus, Director, Central Intelligence Agency, returned a message to call me. I advised Director Petraeus that I had informed the Director of National Intelligence regarding the security issues of an ongoing investigative matter. Specifically, I advised Director Petraeus that the FBI and DOJ had an obligation to report this matter due to his involvement in an ongoing criminal investigation, and that classified documents were discovered on a hard drive owned by the woman with whom he was engaged in an extramarital affair. It's not a pleasant message to have to get. Director Petraeus asked, "Do you know where this is going? Where does it go from here?" I told Petraeus that the DNI would make that determination. And I guess that's exactly who it would fall to. But you'll note, not that it was likely that Comey was going to say anything different, but like you would expect from a FBI director, he gives you the facts and doesn't expound on anything else. And, of course, it would be inappropriate for him to tell Petraeus at that point where it was going and what he thought might happen. And if he won't tell Petraeus, I guess there's not much chance that he was going to tell Trump either, but who knows. Anyway, these are the sorts of things that he makes notes about, and it makes it a lot easier later on when, let's say, for instance, Petraeus had said in October of 2013, I was under the impression that I wasn't under investigation because Director Comey told me that it wasn't going anywhere. Comey, of course, will have a different recollection of that, but more than having a different recollection of it, he will be able to say, I have notes. I made notes every time we spoke. I'll go check my files. Yes, here it is, November 7th, 2012. My notes say, and that's not proof by itself that this is exactly what was said, but it's good evidence that tends to prove that on November 7th, 2012, his immediate recollection of what was said is very different from what Director Petraeus said. Again, not solid proof, but it's a hell of a lot better than, I don't know, that's just how I remember it. I don't know whether Donald Trump makes such memos. I think he relies probably more often on tape, but, who knows whether, we discussed the contents of, the possible contents of any tapes anyway. They may very well not argue in Trump's favor, but he might not, understand that or be willing to acknowledge it. But, we'd love to hear the tapes nonetheless. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting to have lying around as an example of the kinds of things that might be in these files. And I'm sure they're very unexciting, and it will be interesting to get them nonetheless, but they're probably pretty matter of fact. I spoke to the president at X time on X date, and he said this, and I said that, and that's my recollection of things. And that'll go a hell of a lot further than Donald Trump trying to search his memory for what he thinks happened. Everyone will give him an ear, of course, but having it on paper and dated contemporaneously seems a lot more persuasive. It tends to get better weight as evidence. Anyway, all right. What else have we got here to comb through? We've got the New York Times article about these things, but I assume that most of you by now are up to speed on what the New York Times said transpired between the two of them. So it might not be necessary to go over that. And I think Greg has filled us in pretty well on where, let's say, Jason Chaffetz stands on all this too. Oh, and remember that Greg gave us the pronunciation guide to the members of Congress a couple of days ago. And as I recall, Jason Chaffetz, we would like to call him, likes to pronounce it, I think, Chaffetz, which, okay. I like to try to respect the way people want their names pronounced. Sometimes it just gets ridiculous. And also, Jason Chaffetz is a bit of a jerk, and maybe he deserves having his name mispronounced. I don't know. And it seems everyone does, because I'll mispronounce everyone's name eventually. All right. What else have we here to discuss? There's an awful lot. Bits and pieces, really, since Trump hasn't been back on Twitter to regenerate the story here. So now everybody's just parsing all the material they already have. I'll go back and pick up on bits and pieces of stories that we haven't been able to discuss in the last day or two because of the level of outrage that we had to deal with yesterday with yesterday's Trump stories. A couple of follow-ups then on some of the other stories still lingering out there, even though they've been eclipsed by later developments, including the assertion the other day, you remember how ridiculous this was, allegedly by certified letter, even though that's not what he really meant, from Trump's law firm, his tax lawyers in D.C. You'll recall that he was very proud of himself for having asked them to prepare a certified letter, by which we think he might have been referring to make a certification in a letter that they had examined his tax returns and found no significant income from Russian sources. But you'll recall that they had written in there this giant loophole of with certain exceptions, or with few exceptions, and they called out one of the more major ones, of course, the sale of the other mold-ridden, apparently, Palm Beach estate to a Russian oligarch for $95 million. And also a few other exceptions, including income from the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow in 2013. Of course, it struck me pretty quickly that this loophole had pretty much rendered their certification useless because, of course, the third angle of their loophole, they said the way they worded things was I think Armando had said, it was a loophole big enough to drive a truck through. But more to the point, I think, was that it was our understanding on the show that there was simply no reason to believe that Trump's personal tax returns, despite the fact that he owns most of his businesses as sole proprietorships and pass-through corporations, as they pointed out in the letter, there was no reason to believe that there were going to be checks being cashed, no record of checks being cashed from Boris Badnov or any, or Vladimir Putin directly. We weren't likely to see Russian-based sources of income in here because the Russian oligarchs and mobsters with whom Trump was working had long since learned to cover over their tracks by incorporating as limited liability corporations offshore from Russia. So in other words, if 5 Russian oligarchs pooled their money together and formed an LLC and incorporated in Delaware, by the standards of his lawyers, that's a domestic company, an American company, not a Russian source. So, that's pretty damn easy to disguise, that sort of thing. And we remember on the show having discussed some 100 million additional Russian dollars that the Trump organization had raked in its deal with some condo towers just in South Florida. So in other words, I could show you a link and had read you the story of $100 million generated just in South Florida in these 7 different Trump-branded condo towers right off the bat. So no significant Russian income with few exceptions, one being the one we acknowledged, the $95 million sale of the home, then whatever number of millions of dollars from the Miss Universe project. But that's about it. The others are exceptions, and there are a few of them. Well, here's one, $100 million. And I showed everybody that. I said, here's the headline. They say they've got no Russian income with few exceptions. Here's $100 million, and it's just Florida. The Atlantic picked up on that. David Graham, one of the fine journalists working this beat, picked up on this. Trump's $100 million exceptions in Russian income, writing this up at the end of last week. Donald Trump has received more than $100 million in income from Russian sources in one-time transactions over the last decade, but does not have any outstanding debts or holdings in the country, his lawyers asserted in a letter that emerged on Friday. They're talking about and then excerpt that part of the letter from Sherry Dillon and William Nelson of the firm Morgan Lewis. And here was the framing that they used to build out their loophole. With few exceptions as detailed below, your tax returns, they were talking to Trump here, do not reflect, 1, any income of any type from Russian sources, whatever that might mean, any debt owed by you or the Trump Organization to Russian lenders, or any interest paid by you to the Trump Organization to Russian lenders, or 3, any equity investments by Russian persons or entities in entities controlled by you or the Trump Organization, or 4, any equity or debt investments by or for TTO Trump, the Trump Organization in Russian entities. It's gobbledygook, but basically it's not even particularly effective gobbledygook. It just tells you that you're not going to find a Moscow address on the checks that he cashed that constitute his personal income. Totally useless. The named exceptions, as they said, included the $12.2 million from the Miss Universe pageant, $95 million from the 2008 sale of the mansion. The letter, we're told, doesn't name the buyer, but the buyer was Dmitry Rybolovev. Remember him, the fertilizer magnate who purchased the house for more than twice what Trump had paid for it 4 years earlier. And as I recall, it was more or less uninhabitable due to the mold. But okay, the mansion had sat on the market unsold for 2 years at that time. Both of those transactions were already known and widely reported in the press. In addition, it's likely that the Trump Organization or third-party entities engaged in ordinary course sale of goods to Russian or Russian entities, including for hotel rooms, golf fees, and various Trump merchandise, though the amounts are immaterial. The figures in the letter are unverifiable. However, the attorneys state that they reviewed his tax returns for the past 10 years, and of course we'll never see those, so it's unverifiable in that sense. But also they note that they have served continuously as tax counsel throughout that time, but actually only back to 2012, so maybe that's not as helpful as we think. Trump, though, in a break with long-standing precedent for presidents and major party contenders, has not released those returns. During the campaign, he claimed he would release them, wouldn't do it because he was under audit. That was never really much of an excuse either. And gee whiz, he wouldn't want to lean on the IRS to finish up that audit at any time soon, because he knows very well that it's bad news to lean on other government officials using the power of his presidency for personal reasons, right, or political reasons. The letter, though, does not indicate whether the attorneys also reviewed the Trump Organization's returns in preparing it, or whether the company has Russian assets, debts, or other ties that might not appear in Trump's personal tax returns. The few exceptions named might not be the only ones that exist. One could very much read this language in legalese and not feel at all convinced that Russian interests do not have leverage over the president, said Michael Knoll, the Theodore K. Warner Professor of Law and Professor of Real Estate at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. For example, the letter doesn't define several key terms. Are they being technical with language, or are they being straightforward with us? I guess the assumption should be that they're being technical. What it means, or by Russian person or entity, does not seem like it includes basically shell non-Russian entities. So, for example, a Russian could establish a pass-through company in the United States, the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, or any number of places, and then do business with Trump or the Trump Organization. I point that out, interestingly enough, because those were exactly the locations I threw out as suggestions the day the letter came out. But they're pretty obvious suggestions. I threw them out as suggestions because very frequently it is the Cayman Islands and Cyprus that Russians have been using for doing this. It's not something I discovered. It's not something that the writer found in my tweet necessarily. It's just wanted to let you know that we were on the right track when we told you that. Cyprus was just a huge, huge pass-through place. Iceland for a long time, maybe I should say a short time, and then that whole thing blew up. But Iceland comes up fairly frequently for offshore LLCs by some of these Russian oligarchs as well. Cyprus, of course, of particular interest because Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, also has vast interests and holdings in Cyprus, specifically in the Bank of Cyprus, which is going to handle a lot of the transactions for LLCs, offshore LLCs incorporated in Cyprus. I don't know how much action there is for international business elsewhere in Cyprus. But what do I know? Maybe it's a hop in place. Okay. Anyway, Trump or his company could also be working with Russians on a concern that was in neither the U.S. or Russia that might not be covered by the letter. He could also have interest in companies that he and the Trump Organization did not control. That is a minority stake in things, right? Trump has frequently franchised his name to projects around the globe. Wall Street Journal's Rich Rubin reported on similar concerns. A Russian would not lend directly to Trump or his business. Steve Rosenthal, a tax lawyer and senior fellow at the Tax Policy Center in Washington, told Rubin. A Russian would, for example, fund a Cyprus corporation which would lend to Trump or his business, possibly through other intermediary entities as well. The letter also doesn't indicate which years of taxes were covered, though it would not cover his finances since assuming the presidency. The disclaimer that Trump's tax returns do not reflect these things leaves open the possibility of investments, loans, or other financial ties not covered in the returns. Trump could also potentially have losses, but not income, in Russia. Dillon also helped Trump devise a plan to answer worries about the conflicts of interest between his business and his presidential administration, and she, Sherry Dillon, appeared at that January press conference announcing the plan. Most independent ethics experts, however, have rejected that setup as inadequate. And P.S., we did mention to you that day, Morgan Lewis, the firm, was named the 2016 Russia Law Firm of the Year by the research group Chambers and Partners. No idea who they really are, but what a weird title to have won. During a Senate hearing on Monday, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper was asked whether he'd ever seen anything about one of President Trump's business interests in Russia that concerned him. Clapper declined to answer, saying it would have bearing on an ongoing investigation. Lindsey Graham, chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Terrorism, said he wanted to learn more. I have no evidence that the Trump Business Organization did anything illegal with the Russians, Graham said. I have no evidence of collusion, but do I want to know about these business ties? Yes. The White House, of course, quickly responded, he has no ties to Russia. That's what Sean Spicer said on Tuesday. He has no connection to Russia, so he welcomes this. In fact, he has already charged a leading law firm in Washington, D.C. to send a certified letter to Senator Graham on that point, and this is the letter that we got. The interesting thing, of course, was that exchange happened last week, and the letter that was produced was dated March 8th, 2017. What is the idea? He's already charged a leading law firm in Washington to do this. It had already been done, and it was inadequate when it was finished. Then, of course, we learned an awful lot more over the course of the week. Anyway, just interesting to see David Graham over at The Atlantic picking up on the same bits and pieces we have been putting together on the fly here on the radio for the past couple of months. So we've done our reading. We've done well by that, and it seems to be holding up at this point. Let's see. What else have we got here? We've got some suggestions for some other stories here. What is up here? There's an both of these things would make for interesting examinations. What is the second one here? Let's see. The first one from Rebecca Romans, who points out to us that in the Pacific Standard, how the right is perverting religious liberty, the curious phrase that protects peyote and condemns LGBT people. Yeah, an interesting twist to that. That is that's a bit of a topic for it could be of good use today if we can't get Joan online to catch up on that thing. But let's see. Also suggested here from BJ Hutch on Twitter has got this piece for us. What is this? Let's take a look. The UAE's Crown Prince comes to Washington. Oh, that's interesting. What to expect here. Also in the Atlantic really hitting it out of the park. They said, when do they come to D.C., the UAE envoys? Boy, it's always interesting when they come to town, especially in this the atmosphere in which, imagine, by the way, getting off of a commercial airliner dressed in the traditional garb here worn by the Crown Prince of the UAE. I don't think that it would be that easy, especially when the Muslim ban was still in effect and hadn't been struck down by the courts. Imagine trying to come through customs that way. If you weren't a Crown Prince, somehow the Crown Prince gets through pretty easily, but that's because he's coming through general aviation on a private plane, and everything's different. Plus, of course, carrying a diplomatic passport. But though that didn't help the former Prime Minister of Norway, as I recall, he also was pulled aside and questioned despite carrying a diplomatic passport. But okay, let's see. Other items of interest to today. I think both of those things let's see if we can take those things up. I just want to do one more quick survey of the pocket landscape and make sure that there isn't something that's been waiting too long, and if it sits too long in my refrigerator, it's not going to be good anymore. You know all about that one. A good point made by Jonathan Chait the other day on Twitter. Just thought I would bring this one up. Don't need to read you the article necessarily, but a good point about a good counter to, who was it? Mulvaney, the OMB director, the other day, who enraged everybody, quite rightly, by saying that, healthcare was an issue, expensive issue, of course. He's the budget director. He's, entitled to think about such things. But he basically had come out and said, I don't know that everybody should be required to pay for the healthcare of people who sit at home and eat terrible food and get diabetes and can't take care of themselves. And I'm sure he thought he was offering tough love to everybody. But of course, people who live in the real world understood pretty quickly that sometimes ill health is not something that's left up to you. Certainly, we could wish for people to take better care of themselves. But by the way, it was a pretty awful thing to do right in the middle of trying to dismantle, for instance, Michelle Obama's project to make sure that there was better, healthier food being offered to school kids. The idea that we ought, for some reason, to, because we hate big government, say no to grapes and fruits and vegetables and carrot sticks and celery in our schools and give kids the freedom to choose Cheetos instead, so that they would end up likely in the same position. They eventually, if we push them into the position where Mulvaney is willing to justify cutting off their health care, then it's out of our hands, right? Anyway, I just thought Jonathan Chait had a good observation on it, tweeting, the party of guns, God, guns, grits, gravy, and big gulps decides Americans are too fat and lazy to deserve health care. This is something he wrote up in New York Magazine. Actually, it's here's the piece here. Actually, well worth a little bit of our time today. Many conservatives believe that a large proportion of Americans do not deserve access to medical care because their high medical costs result from poor decisions. This belief has been floating around right-wing circles for years, and by the way, I've given it some thought in our left-wing circle from time to time too, just basically to prove the ridiculousness of the point, but I wonder whether there aren't some right-wing ideologues who buy into it mistakenly. The belief has been floating around in right-wing circles for years. It resurfaced during the debate over the passage of Obamacare, and recently was endorsed by Representative Mo Brooks, and again last week by Mick Mulvaney, the OMB director. Mulvaney defended the Republican health care plan because it allegedly provides a safety net for people who, quote, get cancer. However, I just was out today and I got some. However, he insisted that doesn't mean we should take care of the person who sits at home, eats poorly, and gets diabetes. Even though we're doing exactly that with our president, we are taking care of him. Yeah, and I'm sure the defense would be, well, he's a billionaire and he'll buy his own health care. Well, he's not doing it now. And even so, who cares? It's still raising the costs for the rest of us. Almost anybody who is not an American conservative would consider the premise that denial of medical care is a fair punishment for unhealthy behavior self-evidently monstrous. I think we mangled that sentence a little bit, but you get the point. But since the idea has important resonance within the Republican Party, Mulvaney alone is a highly influential member of the Trump administration, it's worth examining the idea on its own terms. There is some proportion of medical costs attributable to lifestyle decisions within one's control. The Affordable Care Act, does allow insurers to charge higher rates to smokers, but it doesn't let them charge higher rates to people who eat badly, refuse to exercise, and so on. It is true that universal health insurance does subsidize the cost of unhealthy behavior. Let's assume that we accept the premise that denial of medical care is morally acceptable tool to attack this problem, which, to be clear, I very much reject. Can the Republican health care plan be justified as a response to this kind of moral hazard? No, it can't. That's the short answer, and we're going to have to keep the answer short because I see the Wi-Fi has come back on at Joan McCarter's house. So time to bring her in and catch up on things in D.C. and elsewhere. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. I'm connected again.
Fantastic.
I'm catching up.
Excellent. Good news. Everybody having their own technical difficulties today. My refrigerator has lost its Wi-Fi signal as well. It doesn't have one. It's lost the ability to refrigerate things, which is kind of basic.
And really. Why do we need refrigerators with Wi-Fi?
I don't know. I don't have one, but you need it to allow the Russians to know what you're eating so they can deny you health care, I think, is what I'm reading. Putting all these things together. I have difficulty connecting all the trends sometimes. Do you know what avocado toast is, by any chance?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah. But apparently if you stop eating it, you'll be able to afford a down payment.
Yes, I got to get rid of my iPhone and the avocado toast, and I'm practically a billionaire at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I should be richer than this, not knowing what avocado toast is. There was also another avocado story in the news that people were injuring themselves, stabbing themselves through the hands, trying to pit avocados. I don't know. I don't know if that's just millennials.
20 years ago it was bagels.
Yeah, right. And then we invented a little thing that will hold your bagel while you cut it. So don't tell me American ingenuity is dead. Right. Anyway, okay, so all right. Now that we have our problems fixed, we were just discussing
our problems are so not fixed.
All our problems are solved.
Our technical issues are dealt with.
Yes, get Donald Trump to cut your
the whole routine of unplugging the modem. Turned out it was my virtual private network had just coughed.
Oh. Okay.
So I'm trying to.
Yeah, and we're all trying to establish these things to safeguard our privacy, and they screw everything up. But
you're very private when you can't get online.
Right, that's true. Impenetrable defenses. Can't get in. Can't get out, but can't get in either. Which is maybe not a bad idea, say, for the president. They ought to screw with his virtual private network, or maybe house arrest would be a good idea.
Well, somebody did something yesterday.
Yeah?
Remember, he sent out his early morning tweets.
Yes.
And the last one was about Comey, and he did his regular ...
Yeah.
And then nothing.
Oh.
4 hours until his next tweet, and it was about something completely different. So somebody intervened and stopped him from tweeting about Comey.
Well, maybe he tweets like he talks, and he changes directions, as I sometimes do. That doesn't surprise me. And, I was going to say he's been showing restraint, but I just think people have gotten to him and said, this is creating enormous legal difficulties for us. We really can't do our jobs for you at all. Especially if you continue to tweet out confessions, that's also not helpful. We've been out there defending you and saying that these stories are untrue, and then you tweet that they are. That's bad.
Yes.
All right. Well,
so apparently they've taken his phone away.
Good.
There were reports last night from people who could hear, or maybe from inside the White House, I'm not sure, that he had come unglued, that he was screaming, that he was swearing, that he was using the F word, that he was really losing it.
Yes.
So.
Well, I can believe that. And there were also indications that there was some screaming going on among the staff the day before that was audible in the press room.
So they had to turn up the TVs.
Right. So, what channel do they have the TVs on there? So they all learned a great deal about whatever it was Fox was distracting things with. They were upset about Tim Allen's show, I think, being canceled. I didn't realize he had one, a new one.
For 6 years or something,
right?
He's had a show.
Great, congratulations and all, but I don't watch a lot of television anyway. It's not like I'm singling Tim Allen out, but I wouldn't have chosen to watch it anyway, I'm sure, but okay, that was big news last night. Tucker Carlson spent like a half an hour on it in the middle of the breaking Comey news. They were going to great lengths to disguise their concern about that one. But let's see, inside Congress with both houses back, I still can't tell what the hell's going on over there. Although I did hear a brief report that the Republican conference got together this morning for a big meeting, and there was no discussion of Trump whatsoever.
Well, that's what one member said.
Okay, that was one report then.
Another said, this stuff takes time. Rep. Aderholt from Alabama said there's no mention of Trump. Ben Siegel tweets, but then according to Rep. Lucas, I'm not sure, I don't see more in the tweet where Lucas is from, Ryan told the conference this morning that oversight takes time and they have to be patient.
It does take time.
Oversight takes time, particularly when you're not doing it. Getting around to maybe thinking about doing oversight takes time.
Yeah, it takes the longer it takes you to begin it, the more time it will take. So but we've never really gotten much in the way of oversight from Republicans on Republicans. That's, I guess, at this point to be expected. It's not good, but it does happen quite a lot. And I don't know. So it's Jason apparently his name is pronounced Chaffetz with a softer sound instead of Chaffetz or Chaffetz.
I don't think that we need to be responsible for knowing how to pronounce his name correctly.
He's going to be on his way out. But he made a big deal of having his subpoena pen at the ready. So I guess he claims
as Laura Clausen quipped when she saw that, it's got plenty of ink left in it, so go for it.
Yeah, it's not going to run out anytime soon. But I don't know. I guess they felt like they were being responsive to the news by saying that they would be subpoenaing these well, I guess all memos having anything to do with that. Maybe they just intend to flood themselves with information and then just say it's going to take us a long time to figure it all out. There's so much to read. You'll just have to sit here and wait until, I don't know, like say January 2019 when I'm not here anymore.
Right.
We'll get around to telling you what we found.
We have a little bit more coming out of that meeting now. Politico is reporting that Ryan says Republicans shouldn't jump to conclusions about Trump and Comey because there are some people out there who want to harm the president. So, yeah.
Wow.
He still has confidence in Trump.
Oh, that's silly, but okay.
He told the press as they exited his morning conference, I guess. But apparently in the meeting this morning, he urged lawmakers to be sober.
Oh, yeah, I definitely urge that. I know it'll be
That
difficult.
is our job, to be sober, to be passionate, and to follow the facts wherever they may lead. The one thing that Paul Ryan is passionate about is keeping this president in office so that he can finally get his Medicare privatization.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be what it's mostly about for members of Congress. They just say what they need to say in order to get their agenda items. They may personally be disgusted by everything going on in the White House. They just need they need a person to carry the pen around to sign whatever they send them. And what that person does with their life in between bill signings, I guess, is of no interest to them.
Absolutely none. So, we found out from McConnell yesterday that this is just drama. Now, that was pre-Comey memo news.
Yeah.
That this was just White House drama. And I think it was pre-finding out that it was Israel who gave us the whose intelligence Trump blurred.
Right. Oh, yes. I haven't updated everybody on that one either. Yesterday morning, everybody was speculating Jordan for some reason, but by the afternoon, it turned out to be worse than Jordan, Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. Where Trump is supposed to be this weekend.
Right. I know. And there were a lot of complaints in Israel about this, justifiably, I would say. We spent all morning hearing from conservatives. Well, the president has the right to declassify that information, which lately has come to mean he can blurt it out. I mean, for multiple presidents, this has happened here. We've had to resort to this as a defense. So even if a president blurts out confidential information, that counts as a thoughtful declassification process. It doesn't. It shouldn't.
It doesn't.
But no one has ever proven that it's prosecutable in any way. So I guess for all practical purposes, I guess it's not. So everyone was making sure to point out that he hasn't broken any laws here. But of course, we're reminded this wasn't our intelligence to give away. We've broken the trust of the Israelis, and still no word on whether that breaks any Israeli laws, by the way. Not certain what the espionage laws are over there, but I bet they're not super favorable. If only there was some way to put the president in their jurisdiction sometime soon.
Do they have the equivalent of diplomatic immunity?
I am sure that he does. However, if he were impeached in flight and landed there, Israeli customs could have something different to say about it. Or maybe he'll forget his passport.
I love these two lines of defense that are coming out. Well, three.
Yeah.
One is that he's being persecuted, the Paul Ryan idea that there are people who are out to get him.
Yes.
As the senator from Iowa, thank you, Greg, said yesterday, there are weasels.
Yeah.
Jim Risch with his weasels in the White House, who those are the people who are the traitors. The ones who blabbed about Trump, blabbing about.
That's like some really super archaic, like 1960s style, commie plot stuff to hear that.
It really is, but that's, where Jim Risch is living in his head. So there you go. So there's that defense. There's he's really just too dumb to understand what he did. He didn't mean to, so don't take it seriously defense.
Yeah. And I buy that one a lot more, but, still, it doesn't really matter. It's one of those ignorance being no defense things.
But there's also, the idea that he would, in this meeting, send Sessions and Pence out of the room so he could just stupidly say one of the things that he says without meaning it because he's dumb.
Yeah.
Hey, Comey, back off Flynn.
Right. Yes. Or the variant that I had read was that, it's not so much that he doesn't know necessarily what he's saying, but this is just the way he talks. He just likes to frame things in sort of vague mob boss terms, thinking I've seen in the movies where these guys don't get prosecuted if they say, I want you to take care of them.
It's
wink,
just
wink.
locker room talk.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, another thing, although he didn't send people out of the room for that one, he made sure everybody heard his previous locker room talk. But yeah, the idea that he wasn't really asking for the investigation to be dropped. He just asked all witnesses to leave the room, in case they wanted a Diet Coke or something.
Right.
I have a button.
I think maybe he sent them out for some ice cream.
Yeah, maybe. One scoop of
to fetch some ice cream for him.
Oh, that could be true.
Yeah.
See things delivered directly to him. He's got a weird thing about food. That's what he does. All right. What was the third of the excuses you recall?
I
know we had
it's
three
if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, there's always that one too, which was never really operative, but I don't know why people like that one so much. I think it's something that Trump always felt was true or should be, especially if he was the president.
I think that is the core of it. I think Trump truly believes he is president. He can do anything.
Yeah. And it's not like it's an informed position like the conclusion that he came to in his study of constitutional law. It's just, I think and it's not something he's not consciously reviving necessarily the Nixonian doctrine there either. It's just he's never really involved himself in politics, and he figured the president is rumored to be, it says in the newspaper, he's a powerful guy. That
leader of the free world.
Yeah. So he must be able to do these things.
And I think it's part of the narcissistic thing.
Oh, almost certainly.
That
he probably thought he could do this stuff even if he wasn't president, just because he's awesome.
Right.
But the fact that he's president, you can tell by the lapel pin here. This is the presidential flag pin. I'm wearing a pin, and I can do whatever I want. And I think he assumed. I mean, it's actually explains quite a lot about all the things that he accused President Obama of doing. He likely thought that it was really true that presidents could do anything, and what Obama was doing with that power was 1, lying about where he was born, 2, wiretapping Trump Tower, 3, setting, using the power of the federal government to screw up business by overregulating it, by dictate, et cetera, et cetera. And that does explain a lot. That's why he thought he could come in and have 2 non-lawyer vindictive right-wing idiots write a legal document that would be binding on immigration policy and not be thrown out immediately by the courts.
Right.
Et cetera,
Speaking of which, one of those non-lawyer idiots is apparently writing Trump's speech on Islam.
Yes.
Stephen Miller's writing it. Woo!
I figured he would have to because he's his chief speechwriter. But yeah, that was another piece of astonishing news. Mr. President, now that you've revealed the intelligence of the Israelis and you're on your way there next week, is there anything you'd like to do before arriving there? Should you prepare in any way? And it's not about, I should be apologizing to the Israelis. Yeah, I want to start a regional war by making
a speech on Islam in Saudi Arabia.
So he's going to
a speech written by Stephen Miller, author Muslim ban.
He's going to Episcopal splain Islam to the guardians of Mecca. Great. So that'll go over well. I think. Can't see any good side
really
for that.
hope that he is suddenly taken ill.
Yeah.
Or maybe Melania is, and he just absolutely can't leave.
Right. Although imagine, sir, you can't go. Melania is sick. What? So what? Oh,
Yeah.
right. Oh, yes. Terrible.
The man who tweets her a happy Mother's Day from the golf course.
Yeah, that was pretty fun too. I don't know about this speech. I imagine, like, what does he say? Miller, of course, a violent Islamophobe, either can't be true to himself or sets Trump up with trouble from the base, although maybe there's just a base that says he's just kidding, don't worry about it. I don't know. But unless he goes and says, basically, in order to satisfy his base and to satisfy Miller, who's writing the speech, Trump basically has to stand there and say things that if he's not carrying a diplomatic passport, he gets beheaded publicly for in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So this might be a really good plan. I'm starting to think this is a good idea. I doubt they'll do it though. I think they'll stay their hand.
I hope so.
So it would be an international incident if they did. And then after that, he's going to go see the Israelis.
And then he's going to go see the Israelis. And then he's going to go talk to NATO, where all of the other heads of state have been informed that they need to keep their speeches between 2 and 4 minutes.
Right.
Because of his short attention span.
I am amazed by that. I mean, and I'm not surprised by it, but I feel like they should have gone the other way. And said, we're not changing anything because idiot Trump is coming. We're still NATO. But I guess they feel like
what they need to do is have their regular meeting with their regular people and set up a sham meeting for him.
Yes.
With actors where they aren't saying anything important. It's not like he's going to recognize.
They'll all wear traditional costumes of their
leaders,
countries. Right.
Just shuttle him off to another room with people who aren't actually deciding important things and let him think that's where he is.
Yeah. I mean, send a German in Lederhosen and someone from Turkey in a fez. Just do it up. Really. And he'll believe that. See, and that would have been a better way. And I'm sure by back channel are basically doing exactly that. But I found that very interesting that they were changing the way NATO was going to do business because they had some hope of engaging him, I guess, or at least not making him fall asleep, although that would not be a bad thing either. So, not really sure if I agree with the decision, but I am going to assume that the people at NATO know what they're doing, and that I just would have messed that up. But wow. Okay, so that's definitely bad news. Where else does he stop? Is that it? Does he return after the NATO thing?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
It will be interesting to see how things go there. I wonder if Pence will start sending out "I'm in charge" in the White House memos.
By the way, Pence, you're kind of in the thick of this too.
Yes.
Kind of up to your eyebrows in this corruption. So, just a reminder out there. We don't know, should Trump be impeached? Yeah. Sessions might go with him. Pence could very well go with him.
All for very different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Pence, I guess if Trump is, Trump could be removed for one reason, discovered by an investigation that also either subsequently or concurrently leads to the conclusion that Pence goes because election issues. Whereas, although Trump was involved in those and those two would be impeachable, we're simply going to impeach him for the FBI portion of things. And Pence goes for the underlying problem. You're out because you tried to stop the investigation, and you're out because the investigation didn't get stopped and we found out what happened. That's entirely possible, too. Of course, that leaves us at the moment with Paul Ryan, who I don't think is impeachable on anything at the moment. And we may have to stop there. And that's not great for the country, but it would be very nice to put the brakes on the international aspect of these problems.
It would. It would. For the rest of the world to see that, yeah, America was stupid enough to do this again, but once again the American system prevailed, and they dealt with it.
Yeah.
And the guy they've got in there now is an idiot, but it's temporary. Mm-hmm. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so. And, well...
I mean, you know, we had Obama after Bush and regained our international standing.
Yes.
Only to let Trump...
Was it again? I feel like I said something. I feel like I warned him about that too. But not specifically Donald Trump. But yeah, these reforms tend to last as long as you've got a president who values those reforms and will enforce them, and enforce those norms. And as soon as you get the next Republican you get is likely, even if there's a serious Republican, to pick up on the old unitary executive idea. And that was just the fancy name that George W. Bush put on Trump's notion, and it was a little bit more refined, that the president can do anything they want.
Right.
So we haven't
and
this.
I don't know. Lying us into war. Yeah. Torture. Yeah, it's...
Yeah. All
things that you can see a normal Republican doing, and a normal Republican accepting as normal. Mm-hmm. Giving state secrets to the Russians?
Yeah, that's a new one.
And it's really still very, very difficult for me to see Republicans being okay with that.
Yeah, even
that's
back
the part
in the day.
that remains baffling to me.
Right. Even in the old days when George W. Bush had looked into Putin's eyes and Putin and whatnot. I mean, I guess we had the seeds of that then. Maybe it's just the conservatives are baffled that we just didn't follow that arc along with the rest of them and learn to love the Russians. But
perhaps that's it.
I don't know. We'll hold on for some old school Republicans to remember that Russia's a weird place and we have to be wary of it. Anyway, we had our late start today. I'm glad that your Wi-Fi is back online. I'm sure they're happy about it.
It's a bit difficult to do the job without it.
Yeah, I know. They're probably going crazy there in the newsroom. Need you back. And we'll catch up on what has been going on in Congress once they figure out what their agenda is again. They came back to their own scrambled agenda.
Tax cuts, privatizing Medicare, and getting rid of health insurance.
Oh, those things. Yes. Okay. Well, no sign of the healthcare bit in the Senate so far, and that's good news for the time being.
Because they're doing it in secret.
Oh, okay. Rats.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll check in on that. Probably we'll have a better picture of things by next Wednesday then.
Unless we've all been blown up.
Oh, right. Well, okay. Yeah, well, we'll count on that. Thanks, Joan. Thanks for coming by and reminding us that we won't be blown up. Please leave. Okay.
Till next time.
Okay. Take care, Joan. Thanks very much. I'm sorry we were only able to bring her in for the very last half of the show. However, lots of news still available for discovery for the rest of the day. And do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day, because the after show is coming up next. Here's what they've got on tap for you. In what's dubbed the Mother's Day Massacre, the extreme Texas Freedom Caucus killed more than 100 bills because the other Texas Republicans are not conservative enough. New York lawmakers are voting to create a state-level single-payer health system.
From Daily Co's Radio,
I'll tell you a little bit more
on
after
netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
The other stuff they've got for you today, the U.S. government has sued United Healthcare Group again for overcharging Medicare Advantage. Also on the last half of the next program coming up, Angela Marks, a.k.a. Angie in Washington State, on board to talk to Wink and Justice on the after show coming up next.